Welcome to the Fargo Cass Clay Food Commission meeting this morning. Appreciate everybody being here. We've got a good quorum. So we'll start off the meeting with approving the order and the contents of the agenda and then also the minutes. So first of all, the agenda. Any changes, additions? If not, a motion to approve would be good.
Motion to approve, Niesemeyer.
Is there a second?
Second, York.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, then the minutes, and there are two sets of minutes in our package. Since there was not a quorum at the last meeting, we have minutes from that one as well as the one previous to it. So if there are no changes, a motion to approve would be good on
Motion
both
to-
of them.
Motion to approve both of them, Copperwood.
And is there a second?
Second, Engler.
All right, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So I think there may be some fairly new members and people that have been here, not been here for a while. So we're going to do introductions. And Tony, if you want to start.
Sure,
Welcome, by the way.
Good morning. Tony Grenberg, newly elected member of the Cass County Commission.
And Paul Kravinoff, newly elected in the Clay County Commission.
Dave Steichen, newly elected Dilworth City Council.
Welcome. Arlette Preston, Fargo City Commission.
Joan Copperwood at large.
Heather Niesemeyer, City of Moorhead.
Karen Engler at large.
Jeff York, at large.
All right. So we have the privilege of getting a presentation this morning from Chandler Esslinger. And Chandler used to be with Essentia, but we are fortunate in Fargo Public Health, Fargo Cass Public Health, to have her join the staff there. And she is going to do a presentation on social determinants of health, which food, I'm assuming, is a pretty important part of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you all this morning. Today we'll be talking about the social determinants of health and food security. So as Arlette mentioned, I am previously from Essentia, worked as the community health program manager there, and then also have a background in anti-poverty programming in community action, and am grateful now to be in my role at Fargo Cass Public Health. I'm going to try to clip along through this because I want to make sure that we have time for questions at the end. This is a topic that I love talking about, so I'll try to keep it short and sweet. We'll talk today and get a foundational understanding of what the social determinants of health are, draw connections between them and the root causes of food insecurity, and gain a foundational understanding of how to address food insecurity. So what are the social determinants of health? The CDC identifies the social determinants of health as the conditions in the environments where people are born, live, work, play, worship, and age that affect our overall health and well-being. And it's broken down into 5 different domains: healthcare access and quality, neighborhood and built environment, social and community context, economic stability, and education access and quality. So you might be thinking, what are some actual examples of what the social determinants of health might look like? And we'll talk about that in just a second. So the social determinants of health are the root causes of health inequity. Social determinants can be positive, they can be negative, but they really profoundly impact our overall health and well-being. Most communities are a mixture of positive and negative community environments, and that can create blind spots and further disparities depending on who's being impacted. So you might be thinking of your own town or your own community or your own neighborhood and think about how your environment might look different, be more conducive to your health and well-being than other parts of your city. So when I think about the social determinants of health, I ask myself questions like, do you have access to safe and affordable housing? Do you have access to safe and affordable transportation? Do you feel safe when you're walking around your neighborhood? Are you free from racism, discrimination, and violence? And if not, what are the factors in your environment and in your community that are creating that experience? Do you have access to education, job opportunities, and a steady income in an area that you can easily access? Do you have access to nutritious foods and physical activity opportunities in your neighborhood, again, in a place that you can actually access? When we talk about income too, that kind of determines how mobile we can be in our communities a lot of the time, especially if we don't have really great transportation infrastructure. So that can really determine what we have access to and where and how we're able to get there. Are you free from polluted air and water? Do you live or work in an environment where there's lots of industry and lots of pollution? Do you live maybe near an interstate or something like that where there's a lot of pollution that's happening? And do you have access to the language and literacy skills that you need in order to be able to navigate your life? Do you have culturally competent and responsive people that work in the services that you access so that you're able to meet your needs? And so when we're talking about the social determinants of health and food security, a lot of times food security is actually a part of the model for the social determinants of health. But that's really shifted, and they really think of it more as an economic stability and a neighborhood and built environment challenge. Do you have food that is healthy for you that you can access near you? And do you have the income to be able to afford that consistently? So in 2020, 13.8 million households were food insecure at some point during the year. And food insecurity doesn't necessarily cause hunger. A lot of times we use the word hunger and food insecurity kind of interchangeably, but hunger is a possible outcome of food insecurity. So the USDA defines food insecurity in two different categories. Low food security, meaning that you have reduced quality, variety, or desirability of your diet, with little or no indication of reduced food intake, and then very low food security, where you have multiple indications of disrupted eating patterns and reduced food intake. And what this means functionally for families is that they're choosing to have to put their money elsewhere instead of procuring the food that they need to feed themselves and their families. Again, the USDA, I really liked this additional definition of food insecurity, where it mentions that food insecure households are not necessarily food insecure all the time, but food insecurity reflects the choices households sometimes need to make between meeting those basic needs such as housing, health, and childcare, and purchasing those nutritionally adequate foods. So, what are the root causes of food insecurity, and how do those map onto the social determinants of health? So when you literally Google root causes of food insecurity, this is the list that comes up. Poverty really influences how food secure we are, again, whether or not we have the economic stability to ensure that we can procure those foods for our families. Social inequity and built inequity. Do you have a grocery store or a place where you can buy food that is close to you, that you can actually access? Are you experiencing racial injustice? Are you experiencing systems that are preventing you from accessing the foods you need or the services that you need? Lack of affordable housing is a really big indicator of food insecurity. Again, families have to make choices about how they spend their money when they have limited money to do so. Social isolation, this is really speaking to our elderly population, our aging population. If you're socially isolated from your community care networks, or you are unable to access, again, the services you need to help procure the food for you, that can really limit your ability to be food secure. Again, the location in which you live. Are you able to easily access the foods that you need in order to feed yourself and your family? And transportation. If you don't have access to personal transportation, do you have access to public transportation? Does it get you to where you need to go in a timely manner? All those different things. And you can really map every single one of those disparities onto the social determinants of health if you're looking at the graphic right next to it. So the impact of food insecurity on adults and children is that they tend to have higher rates of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress, and that puts them at risk for chronic diseases. Hungry children are sick more often, can suffer from those physical and developmental disabilities or impairments that can result in lower academic achievement. And in short, hunger really weakens the family's ability to care for themselves and their community. It makes it difficult for them to reach their long-term potential. It costs a lot for our taxpayers and community members. And that level of economic precarity or not having that economic stability is just a really challenging experience for families to go through. And the burden of hunger and food insecurity really falls most heavily on people who are low income, people who live in rural communities, people of color, women, children, older adults, and disabled people. So the populations of people that we think about who have the most barriers to access, whether that's because of their own economic stability or the structures that we put in place in our community. So if you've heard me talk about the social determinants of health before, this is a graphic that I really love to lean on. It looks really scary when you look at it, but it actually breaks down and helps us conceptualize what the social determinants of health really looks like. And at the bottom here, you can see we have public policies and social norms. So public policies, the things that we create at the national, state, local, and institutional level, so even our own organizations, those policies can inform whether or not people have increased or decreased access to the services they need. And public policies are also influenced by our social norms, the things we think, feel, believe, and our attitudes towards these different types of policies and social programs. Sometimes I think about social norms in terms of what we allow. A lot of the systems and disparities that we have are man-made problems that have man-made solutions, and we can influence those through public policy, but it takes the political will to do so. So both of those different factors then impact the distribution of opportunity. As we already talked about, there are specific populations of people in our community who are more at risk to be food insecure. And that is because of the distribution of opportunity, how those public policies, again, either limit or enhance somebody's ability to get their immediate needs met. And then the grayed out box there, we finally get to the social determinants of health. So we already have 3 different contributing factors that influence how the social determinants of health influence your life. And this is a decidedly maybe more negative interpretation of how the social determinants of health impact your overall health and well-being. And as you can see, food insecurity is on there, along with things like adverse childhood experiences, not having access to quality education, being housing insecure. And then once those social determinants of health really exert their forces on our lives, that's when we have these reduced options for the things that we actually get to decide for ourselves and for our families. So as much as we may like to think that we have complete free will and control over every single facet of our lives, in reality, there are external forces at play that sometimes artificially limit the choices that we're able to make. We don't all have access to all of the same choices all of the time, especially with these systemic barriers in place. That can mean that sometimes we make bad choices or the best possible choice out of a variety of really bad options. And sometimes that can lead us to high-risk behaviors, and it causes a lot of stress. And I don't think I need to tell you all how hard stress is on our bodies and how much that impacts our overall health and well-being long-term. And then in turn, those choices we make, the options we have that are available to us, determine our social, environmental, and behavioral risk. It determines how likely are we, given our natural predispositions and our environmental context, to develop a chronic disease, to have just that lower quality experience of health and well-being. So once we get to the social determinants of health in this matrix, that's really the point of no return, because at that point, all of these different forces have exerted their influence over our lives to the point that our options have become limited. And so I think if, for this group, to think really hard about what are the upstream opportunities we have to ensure that the social determinants of health don't get to exert as much force on our overall health and well-being. And so opportunities for intervention really come within the first 3 factors that influence our overall health and well-being, which is public policies, social norms, and the distribution of opportunity. Healthy People 2030 actually lists food insecurity as one of the main topics that they want to address, and they put it squarely within economic stability. A lot of the programming that we use to support families' access to foods, nutritiously healthy foods, are monetary. And so what kinds of public policy can we put in place to help people get their immediate needs met and ensure our systems are operating in such a way that people even have access to those good choices that we hopefully have available in our communities? All right. That's my spiel. Thank you all for your time today. I'd love to answer any questions or any comments, hear any comments you may have about my presentation while I pick up the microphone thing.
Any questions for Chandler?
Madam Chair,
Yeah, hi, Tom. Yeah.
thank you. Great presentation. I was curious, your slide that had the statistic from 2020, 13.8 million in an insecure category, if I may. That's nationally, I presume.
Yes.
Do we track statistics of that number locally in Cass and Clay County? And if so, is there kind of a provided updated information on year by year, if we're making progress, or, what's the situation locally?
Yeah, so I typically get that statistic from the Great Plains Food Bank or the Cass Clay Hunger Coalition. We do know that in 2020, during the pandemic, when there was an increase in funding for different social programs related to food, the number actually dipped down, but overall the trend is trending upwards. One interesting thing that also came out of the pandemic, when we had increased access to these social supports for food, there was a study that showed rates of child abuse actually went down because of increased access to that financial support.
Could we possibly get those numbers, the local numbers?
Oh, certainly.
Okay, and Adam, if you want to distribute that, that would be great. Questions, other questions, comments? Yeah, Heather.
Sorry. Chandler, I want to follow up. You had, again, a slide that talked about specific social determinants and how they can each have impacts. At January's commission meeting, I believe we had a presentation from Great Plains Food Bank on an initiative they had last year. And it was about receiving feedback that the types of foods available in the food banks were not culturally appropriate or accessible to many of our families in the Fargo-Moorhead area, or I should say in our county area. And so they had done this initiative to purchase foods locally and that were culturally appropriate that perhaps people had requested or from different types of markets. Is that something, when you talk about upstream opportunities, to consider that sort of initiative is something that would lessen the impacts of social determinants? I'm just trying to make some connections here.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we have opportunities to meet people's immediate needs while we have overall long-term strategies that address why people are food insecure. So in terms of an immediate response to people's needs, yes, I absolutely think ensuring that people have culturally responsive foods that they have access to is a really meaningful way to ensure that people aren't experiencing food security. They're receiving food that they even know how to cook, that feels like home to them. That's also super important just for your psychological safety. And I think, there's lots of other opportunities that we could explore as a community, as a nation, about investing in or ensuring that maybe folks who are on EBT or SNAP or whatever that looks like can purchase some of those culturally responsible foods from a local international grocer or something like that. So I think it's absolutely a good intervention and meets the needs of a very specific population of people that have a lot of barriers to, getting the foods that they need and that are most relevant to them.
Marvelous, thank you. I appreciate you providing additional examples of what policy can sort of form and take to impact the long-range social determinants. Thank you very much, Chandler.
I have to say, Chandler, I appreciated the slide where you showed the policies, social norms, and then their point of no return, and how so many issues interplay with an individual or a family's ability to be healthy, and that included housing, economic stability, food stability, that kind of thing. So, as I'm sitting here thinking, it would be nice to have a shortened version of this at the city commission as a city commission presentation, and perhaps there would be some other bodies that might benefit from it too. So that might be something to think about. Any other comments or questions?
Just have a quick question. Is this, is your slide presentation available at the Fargo Cass Public Health website, or is this available anywhere, or?
It's not available on the website, but I can ensure that you all have access to my slides, and I would be more than happy to continue this conversation in other groups if that seems relevant.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds good?
I would appreciate it, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
thank you.
So the next item, Eric, is it pronounced Haig? Haig? Sorry, I'm probably massacring that. From Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, and you're going to talk about a garden initiative there.
Yeah.
Right up our alley.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I love talking about plants, and our refugee agriculture program is no exception to that. Chandler, thank you for the perfect segue into this, talking about food insecurity as well as those culturally significant foods that we're striving to kind of fill those gaps here in the Fargo-Moorhead area. Just a quick table of contents. Program overview, we'll talk about the topics that we are teaching in the refugee agricultural program, as well as some of the benefits, the successes that we've experienced so far, as well as the challenges and obstacles. Weather has been the biggest one this year, and how we're measuring success, as well as how you all can support this initiative. For context, this picture here is just a sample of a harvest from one of the Growing Together community gardens. We are partnering with them for the establishment of a garden at Village West Park. We'll talk about that in a few slides. So the objective of this program, it is funded by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. It's a 3-year grant that LIRS received, and it's to encourage the development of agriculture and food systems while simultaneously working towards improving the livelihoods of refugee families resettled in the United States. So for the participants, everybody can come and garden, but for the education portion and nutrition education and market education portion of the program, the eligible participants are refugees that have been resettled here in the United States in the past 5 years. Right now, we're seeing a lot of Afghan refugees, Ukrainian refugees, as well as an increase in Sudanese refugees, and a large stream of refugees coming from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So the primary focus of the program is production of market fresh produce for personal consumption by the families that are participating, as well as for sale, specifically sale through farmers markets or community-supported agriculture and some of those fresh produce sale opportunities that we have. Some other focus areas that we're exploring with the group of participants is food safety in handling, harvesting, as well as food preservation. Extending our very, very short Zone 4 season here. So that is getting an early start with seed starting in the spring and using methods such as like row covers or cold frames to extend it in the fall and in the spring as well. We're going to do some exploration of floriculture as well. That's not a huge industry in the area, but there are market producers that are growing wildflowers and cut flowers for sale or as an add-on to like a CSA box or community share. And we're definitely doing a big focus on seed saving. As a grant-funded program, we're looking to save money in all the ways that we can. We received incredible donations of seeds. A lot of them were open pollinated varieties from all around the world. And we can grow those and save those seeds and spread them throughout our community, especially those seeds of those really culturally significant vegetable varieties. And we'll explore some of those varieties in a few slides. The main benefits of the program for the participants are access to growing space. Almost every single one of our participants have some sort of agriculture background. Our youngest participant is a 19-year-old man from Sudan who worked on a farm until that farm was attacked. He was shot 3 times, twice in the torso. He still has a round in his knee that they weren't able to address when they were over there. And all he knows his entire life is farming and agriculture. And now he's living in an apartment with a north-facing balcony, and he can't grow a flower in a pot on a north-facing balcony in Fargo. So we are establishing a new garden within 1 mile walking distance of the apartments where many of our refugee clients are initially housed. The participants are also going to gain technical support, educational opportunities, as well as by working in the garden and participating, they're going to be entitled to a portion of the harvest, a large portion of that harvest, which they can then use with their own families to supplement their food supply and reduce the amount of money that they need to spend at the grocery store or their reliance on the charitable food network here, like emergency food pantries and food banks. As well as if they have a desire, they can possibly monetize that by selling it either at farmers markets through CSAs, or we will be giving them experience selling in a farmers market-like environment at the Growing Together Farmers Market, which will be taking place on Tuesdays from 2 to 6 p.m. throughout the summer, starting in July. That's just a little plug there for that. Some of the program successes that we've experienced so far, I joined this position in January. We have no framework for anything like this in the state of North Dakota, so we've been kind of reaching out and organizing with other successful programs around the nation. We acquired land use for 0.9 acres. This is at Village West Park. It's just north of Hobby Lobby and the natural food grocery store right off of 45th Street. This is a underutilized piece of land and just shy of 1 acre. We're going to be putting in, well, we broke ground on it last night, started tilling it right before that big rainstorm hit at about 5 p.m. So that is underway. And I just want to do a shout out to the Fargo Park staff, the facilities staff, as well as the Fargo Park board members. They've been incredibly supportive in leasing this land to us, as well as giving us space. There's an old warming house there that they're going to be turning on the water so that we have access to water, bathroom facilities, as well as a place to store our tools there. We have had a lot of seeds donated from all over the nation. About $800 worth of seeds were donated. And we received an incredible amount of seeds from local gardeners who have been seed saving over the past many years. And so those vegetable varieties are cultivated specifically to succeed and produce high yields here in the Fargo area. So we're very grateful to everyone who has donated seeds to this program. We also have a really awesome partnership with the NDSU Extension. Don Kinsler is reviewing the curriculum that we're delivering, making sure that we're not passing any incorrect information as far as the agriculture, horticulture side. And we're also working with the nutrition and food education to deliver nutrition, food safety, food preservation classes as well. And then, of course, our partnership with Growing Together Community Gardens, who have laid the groundwork with their, I believe, 8 existing gardens in the area. We're basically taking that model and just R&D, ripping off and duplicating it at our garden. So these are some of the unique varieties that I just want to quickly talk about. Up in the top left, we have a pepper called Dolly Corsani, and it comes from the Himalayan mountains. This is used extensively in Bhutanese cuisine, and we have a very large resident population of Bhutanese immigrants and refugees. This pepper, if you were to purchase it in the market, if you could find it available, it would run you probably about $46 per pound. That's pretty cost prohibitive. I'm not going to go spend $46 on a pound of peppers at the grocery store. And if I am very conscientious of my food budget, if I'm working with limited resources, this might not be possible for me to acquire. So we're going to be growing, I think we seed started like 200 to 300 plants. We got seeds from our Bhutanese gardeners and from a seed producer on the East Coast. That it's a hot pepper, a hot chili pepper that is used in seasoning food. It's got a Scoville rating of about 350,000. Below that, we have Aleppo peppers. These are come from Syria. They're grown almost like a paprika pepper. They're dehydrated, ground up, and used as seasoning in a lot of Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and Levant dishes. This one runs, I got some data here, about $25 a pound for dried pepper. So once again, if this is something that you've grown up cooking with your entire life, and then you come here, that'd be like if we went to the grocery store and all of a sudden like corn was $40 for a pound of corn. Probably just not purchase it anymore and not include it in our diet, which can be really devastating to groups that have grown up with this as a staple in their cuisine. Top in the middle, we have Afghan gandana, which is a perennial leek grown in Afghanistan. And this was incredibly difficult to find, but we did find a seed producer in Colorado that is growing them, and we were able to acquire some of these seeds. This is something, talking to our local Afghan population, this was like the biggest vegetable that I tried tracking down and that I received the most requests for. It's used in traditional dishes, a dumpling called ashak and balani, these are native national dishes to Afghanistan, and it's impossible to find this here. Some of the ethnic grocery stores will carry them for a very small period of time, but even then, it is extremely expensive for just a little bundle of these leeks. Below that, we have Ukrainian squash. I found these on a rack at Baker Garden and Gift, and I was like, oh, I'll just pick these up. Looks neat. I brought them back, and we recently hired a Ukrainian case aid worker who is also our translator, who came to America about 6 months ago. And I showed it to her, and I said, look, I picked this up. This is kind of neat. We'll throw it in the garden and grow it. And her eyes just lit up, and she said, oh, I know this vegetable, and just kind of held the seed packet in her hands and was just overjoyed to see something familiar from her home country during this time that she is just displaced and so far from home. In the top right, we have tree okra from Ghana. This is one we acquired 10 seeds from this grower in Georgia. He is an Army veteran, runs Comfort Farms. It's a nonprofit that helps veterans, and this is just a gigantic okra variety. We're going to try to grow it here. We have no idea how tall it's going to get, if it's going to succeed, how much it's going to produce, but this is going to be a familiar sight to our refugees who have come from Africa. Below that, we have the Scotch bonnet, which is a habanero from West Africa. This is another super hot one that is used in traditional cooking in West Africa. So those are just some of the unique varieties that we'll be growing at our park. Some challenges and obstacles that we encountered. Transportation, as we were talking to our participants, was the biggest obstacle. So we looked to start a new garden within walking distance of where our target population was living. And that is in the 9th Avenue Circle area, just north of Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby is down here in this area. And we got this corner right up here. And this is the Buena Vista Trailer Court right there as a point of reference. And so we were looking for a place where we could acquire green space and make it accessible. And Fargo Parks voted unanimously to allow us to till up this green field and put in some vegetables. The other thing, too, is time and scheduling. A lot of refugees work 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. They are picking up weekend differential on those weekend shifts, so they can't attend the other community gardens that meet maybe right at 5 p.m. or in the middle of the day. So we're going to be meeting from 3 to 5 p.m. on Sundays throughout the summer. Our first meeting is this Sunday for doing garden prep. I'm aware it's Mother's Day. That was overlooked when we initially started, but we'll remember that one for next year and probably not schedule our opening weekend for Mother's Day. Some of the key performance indicators that we're measuring, the pounds of produce harvested. That's the big one. How much fresh produce are we introducing into our local food networks? And what is the value of that produce? How is it impacting the refugees that are participating? Of course, the number of participants is a big performance indicator. And we're also going to be utilizing the USDA Food Insecurity Index survey, which is a proven survey to measure those food insecurities of how frequently are these families making trade-offs of important things or going without food so that their kids can have food, or how frequently are they just worried about having enough food to make it to the end of the month. And then also the total number of training hours delivered. So these are what we will be measuring. How can you help as elected officials and representatives? Saying thank you to the park board members and just giving them a little a big thank you for allowing us to run this program on park property. You're always welcome to visit the garden. It's located at 4415 9th Avenue South. There's a big water tower there and a dog park, and we are in the upper northeast corner, tucked behind the warming house. You're also invited to come and garden with us. 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. every Sunday. We'll be meeting starting this Sunday until probably the end of September. So if you want to come out, I would recommend, if you want to see the actual garden flourishing, maybe come out in July. Right now it's looking rough as we're getting it off the ground. But yeah, and then just talking about the program to people that you know, getting the word out there. We're always in need of financial and material donations for equipment, and we do plan on putting in some raised bed gardens. We lost a portion of the garden area because when we applied for the dig permit, we found out we had a gas line going right through the eastern edge, and it's pretty wide area that we can't dig there. So we're hoping to get some lumber for raised beds, and that'll be kind of the next step of this project, is building those raised beds and really maximizing how much food we can produce in this limited area. And so with that, this is a little summary of just how much Growing Together grew last year. Our goal for this garden, being a first-year garden, is to produce 6,000 pounds of food. And I think we can achieve that with the rate that we're going, and we'll be actually putting some plants in the ground this weekend. So with that, I will yield to any questions or comments.
Questions or comments from the commission members?
I participate in one of the Growing Together gardens, the Market Garden, and so I'm thrilled. I had heard about this, but this is a lot more detail, so I'm very excited for you and for all of those who are involved. So thank you for your leadership.
I'm thinking of all the parkland and empty lots in the city. It'd be great to see gardens in all of them. All right, well, thank you so much, Eric.
To that point, that was loud. Commissioner Preston, I first of all just wanted to congratulate you, Eric. I know you said you started in January, and it's really amazing what you have accomplished already in such a short time. So huge kudos to you and everyone else involved. And then I'm wondering if you could say any more about the process to get the support from the Fargo Park Board. And maybe any advice that you would have for others who would like to make a similar type of request in their community. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for the kind comments. For the park board, we had to develop a proposal as well as a lease agreement, because we have a formal lease agreement in place. We presented it to the facilities committee and had some questions back and forth about what we're going to be doing there, what the impact on the land is. Overall, it benefits the park district because they no longer need to mow 1 acre. They don't need to pay someone to mow that acre. They don't need to apply herbicides to it to keep weeds down or anything like that. And the increased presence there actually reduces the chances of vandalism or graffiti that might happen in the area, on the park and on the warming house that's there, which has been subject to some vandalism in like graffiti in the past. So they saw it as a win-win for themselves. And after they approved that, the facilities committee forwarded it to the park board with recommendations to approve. And that was approved at the April meeting. So since then, we have been working hand in hand with them. They've just been super great, super confident in our ability to succeed there, and very, very supportive. So it's been a joy and a pleasure working with the Fargo Parks District.
Any other questions or comments?
I have another. Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, hi, Eric. So yeah, a couple of questions. How do you, is it word of mouth? Is that how you work with the communities, or do you expect, for instance, the one you were talking about, the new one, is your main outreach really first to that group community of people that live specific to that area? Is that how it is? And then beyond that, depending on participation, for sure, right? How does that growth look?
Yeah, we initially opened it up to our client population, so enrolled refugees who have are enrolled in our programs, and we do that by talking to the caseworkers and saying, "Hey, who do you have that you're working with that might be interested in this?" So we do that outreach, and then we followed up with a lot of dissemination at the Dakota High, where they do the English learning classes in the evenings and throughout the day, and those points in the community where our caseworkers are involved and can reach out. Additionally, just being there in the field working on it, every single time that we've been there working, we've had people come up and ask, like, what's going in here? What's happening? And so we've enrolled several people just in that manner. But yeah, we're doing a lot of dissemination activities to increase enrollment. And our target is we would really like to see like 30 to 40 participants each year. Right now, we have 11 signed up to participate, 11 refugee families. So,
And then one last thing, maybe I wasn't paying attention well enough, but give me the acronyms here. So, what is RAP?
RAP is Refugee Agriculture Partnership Program.
Okay.
That's the official name of the program with the Office of Refugee Resettlement and USDA.
Right. So that garden that you were speaking to will have that name as a reference, or what are you going to call that garden there on 9th Avenue?
So we actually just designated a name for it. It's going to be in the Growing Together Community Garden Network, which is
okay.
what the GTCG is
Okay.
at the bottom. And we're calling it the Welcome Garden at Village West.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I just have one quick question. You said you have a lease agreement. How long is that for, and when do you have to re-up for that?
Yeah, I think the lease agreement is for 3 years or 5 years,
Nice.
and Growing Together has a few gardens on Fargo Park's property, and it's been a really good, strong relationship working with them. So they haven't had any trouble or reservations about renewing those leases when they come up.
Okay, I was glad to hear it wasn't year by year.
No, no,
Thanks for
it's-
all your work. This is a great presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to serve this population, and I'm just really, really excited to see what we can grow this summer.
Well, thank you, Eric. Appreciate you being here, and yeah, thank you. So the next item, those of us that are a little bit newer to the commission, there's a lot of resources this Food Commission has developed in the past, and it's good to kind of review what those are. There's some policy kind of implications with a lot of them. So since a number of us are in policy-making kind of positions, I thought it would be good to review them. And we're doing this 2 at a time in our monthly meetings. So Adam, thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. As Commissioner Preston mentioned, this is a continuation of a discussion that we had last meeting, where we thought it would be good to review some of the resources that the Cass Clay Food Partners has developed over the past 8 years, especially with a number of new elected officials and new at-large members. This is a recap of the slide that we had the last meeting, but since 2015, we have put together nearly 24 different resource documents, and these come in 2 different varieties. One we call blueprints, which look at food systems from a land development code perspective and how it relates to zoning in different jurisdictions in the Fargo-Moorhead area. And we've also developed what we call issue briefs and snapshots, which provide an overview of an issue on a local food topic in the area at the time. So taking a closer look at some of these resources that we've developed 12 blueprints, and you can see here on the left-hand column, they include community gardens, farmers markets, municipal and commercial composting, cottage food laws, gleaning practices, healthy corner store initiatives, nutrition programs at farmers markets. And then the last 5 we have revised and amended here in June of 2020. And those include backyard beekeeping, backyard chickens, backyard composting, season extenders, and residential gardening. As for issue briefs, those include taking a closer look at food waste. In 2019, we delved into the hunger and food insecurity in the metropolitan area. We also developed an issue brief looking at pollinator habitats in 2019. And then rounding out, some of the snapshots also include single-use materials, pesticides on public land and school grounds, and then also the most recent snapshot was looking at how best to incorporate food systems language into comprehensive plans in the area. And all of these resources can be found at the Cass Clay Food Partners webpage. And we have discussed, we'll probably be updating some of the older blueprints here in the coming weeks and months here. So look forward to that. So at the last meeting, we reviewed the blueprints for backyard chicken keeping and residential gardening. This month, we thought we'd look at the 2 blueprints for farmers markets and produce stands and the blueprint for backyard composting. So if you look at the right-hand column, the difference between farmers markets and a produce stand, farmers markets, multi-stall market, which sells agricultural products directly to the general public at fixed locations, whereas produce stands, those are usually temporary seasonal sales. Usually they're at sites that are near where the produce is actually grown. And then on the left-hand side, just some general stats on farmers markets in the U.S. Number of farmers markets has tripled in the United States since 1994. At our last count, just within the metropolitan area alone, there are currently approximately 10 farmers markets. The largest one by far is the Red River Market, which most of you are probably aware of, but each community actually has one or several farmers markets of their own, including Moorhead, West Fargo, Dilworth, and other communities in that area. And then the bullet point there at the bottom, one thing that we did highlight in the blueprint is that various farmers markets tend to allow and or promote individual supplemental nutrition assistance programs at farmers markets so that you can actually use those federal monies for produce that eligible individuals are able to use. So when thinking about the land use regulations, zoning regulations for farmers markets, they tend to just look at what types of zoning districts the farmers markets would be allowed in. And within the metropolitan area right now, 3 land use development codes, zoning codes, address farmers markets. They include the city of Dilworth, Clay County, and the city of Fargo. I'll note that in the city of Moorhead, farmers markets are not addressed in the city code, but there is what's called the temporary 180-day permit that you can use to set up a farmers market in the city. So another thing that our blueprints tend to look at are some of the benefits, and these include looking at health, environmental, economic, and social benefits. So for the farmers markets and produce stands blueprint, I just highlighted some of the benefits that we put together in the blueprint. So looking at health benefits, they include increased access to fresh, healthy local foods, having diverse local foods in markets for consideration, and also having farmers markets being able to contribute to food security and the availability of people to have access to safe, culturally acceptable, nutritionally adequate foods in the area. Looking at environmental benefits, one study that was highlighted in the blueprint for farmers markets, it did find that 22% of farmers' crops would not be marketed if farmers markets were not available in different areas. This is due to supermarkets not accepting produce outside some of the regulations that they must adhere to. But rounding out some of the other environmental benefits, just reduced packaging material and also reduction in greenhouse gases due to transportation costs. Looking at economic and social benefits, you have the potential for producers to retain a higher proportion of the sales due to being able to sell directly to consumers, not going through different vendors. And just also increased spending in the local economy, which tends to have a multiplier effect. So the more monies that you spend locally, it helps to promote additional spending in the local economy. And then social benefits, to move over there briefly, just consumers being able to have access to foods that they may be missing out at different supermarkets, and having kind of a broad spectrum of people who you might not otherwise interact with, being able to interact with people in farmer market setting. So the next blueprint I'll talk about briefly is backyard composting. And then some of the stats that we included in this blueprint and highlighted here in the slide. 650 pounds of compostable materials are generated by the average U.S. household per year. 4 pounds of trash is generated by the average person per day. 1.5 tons of solid waste is generated by the average person in a year. 200 million tons is the amount of garbage that Americans produce in a single year. And of that, 60% is considered organic waste, which includes food scraps, yard trimmings, paper, etc., which goes to landfills that could actually be composted. So when thinking about the land use regulations that would be related to composting, these usually have to deal with setbacks, so making sure that your compost piles aren't close to a neighboring property. It also has to do with height limitations, so you don't have a compost pile that is above a certain height in your backyard. And also some of these other ways that composting is addressed in zoning codes is that composting may be subject to nuisance violations. But in our metropolitan area, Moorhead and West Fargo are the two jurisdictions, Moorhead, West Fargo, and Cass County are the three jurisdictions that have each addressed composting in some way or another. I'll note with the city of Fargo, it's not addressed in the local land development code, but the solid waste department does sell what are called earth machines, so that residents can compost at their homes in the area. And just one of the last things I'll note in the backyard composting blueprint, there's important considerations for residents if they're thinking that they want to compost in the area. One is to have a proper, what's called a CN ratio. It's a carbon to nitrogen ratio. So the carbon, that includes leaves, twigs, and straw. Nitrogen, that includes your food waste. In some instances, if you have backyard chickens, it include chicken manure. Making sure that you have that proper ratio so that you actually have those piles that can compost into materials that can a material that can be used for gardening and other agricultural purposes. And that ratio is recommended to be a 30-to-1 to 50-to-1. Also in the blueprint for the backyard composting, it just has information about the need to alternate layers between that carbon and nitrogen, and then having additional carbon on top of that pile, so that you can actually compact that in, and so that you can get that compost pile going. The last two items there is to make sure that compost piles are moist but not too wet, and then also to monitor compost piles as materials break down, as piles can get, the slide does cut off here, but compost piles can get hot once they get going. It's not uncommon to actually see them start seeing steam rise once you get the materials that start to compost. So just to make sure that you monitor that so that you don't have a fire risk. So those are some of the information that we've put together in the 2 blueprints for farmers markets and produce stands and backyard composting. We'll likely review several other blueprints here in the coming months, but I'll stop right here. And if there's any questions, happy to take them at this time.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, Adam, my wife and I have been part of CSAs and whatnot for last decade, but just curious, and it was around 10 years ago. Now this is more Minnesota side. I don't know if you have background in this or not. Is there a certain size and scope that farmers markets, gardens, we're involved, start getting a pushback from grocers, and that is there a policy? I know on the Minnesota side, there was a real push at one time, I don't know where it ended up, that CSAs were being pushed back by the grocers and that type of thing. Do you know anything of that? And I'm thinking in the way of policy in our areas.
That's a good question. I don't have any information available on that. Is there anybody else in the steering committee that happens to know anything?
Okay.
It's something we can take a look at, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know they lobbied again, they were lobbying.
Yeah.
But I don't know that anything ever happened, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, I think more communities were starting to do it. So I don't know if it got lost or just the effort went away. But if there would be, we're ever aware of, we should be mindful of it.
Oh, good question.
Questions? Other questions?
I have a question. Is there any sort of momentum on like apartment life and composting your kitchen scraps and bringing them to somewhere? Maybe there's a little bit of land over by Village West that could use some.
That's another good question. It's not something not something that was directly addressed in the blueprint.
No problem.
Although we've addressed that in other blueprints, especially gardening at multifamily residences in the area, and ways to improve or integrate that. No, it's a good question.
Heather, yeah.
Thank you. I think Karen brings up a really good point, since a lot of our residents across our communities do live in apartments or smaller facilities, not to sort of have that backyard space, or it may be a prime and they may not want to give it up for play areas or pets or those sorts of things. As just a food for thought, this was not just to pile on more, but I think perhaps looking at alternatives that people could do in alternative homes, like worms in closets, or policy recommendations that we could have compost materials collected in our cities or our counties, and what that would look like for an impact in the system. I know it's briefly sort of touched on some benefits and things, but looking at a large portion of our residents being apartment or townhome dwellers, or just rental properties in general, they may not be able to input the infrastructure in their home that would allow for composting. And maybe that's something we could look at as a commission for a future blueprint for alternatives or ways to impact positively, and just have policy recommendations, because that might be something that we could take on as policymakers for change, not tomorrow, but in the future.
Well, that's another good question. Something I failed to mention at this meeting, I mentioned it last March, but we tend to look at dozens of other jurisdictions to see what their ordinances, what their zoning restrictions are when we first develop these blueprints. When we do look to update some of these, I think it would help to maybe look see if, for example, for composting at multifamily residences, maybe that's something that has been addressed in other jurisdictions that we can incorporate into an update. So just to think a little bit more holistically. for people of all living circumstances in our community.
So I have a question, Adam. In the cases where some of these items aren't addressed in the land use codes, is there some advantage for doing that? Does it create a more permissive environment when people are calling and saying, can I do this? What's the advantage for actually codifying it?
That's a good question. So for other blueprints that you see, you'll note that, for instance, there's some activities that are expressly prohibited. When I guess thinking of residential composting, with it being addressed in a land development code or zoning ordinance, the benefit of that is just people would know what the restrictions would be, in making sure that there isn't an issue with any types of nuisance issues with people in adjacent properties, whatnot, and also just making sure that residents are aware that this is something that is allowed in their community,
Okay.
something that they may not think about otherwise.
Yep.
Some ideas that come off the top of my head.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
I just had a really quick comment, if I may. Great questions about alternatives, especially for residents in apartments. I know municipal composting is a whole can of worms, no pun intended. And the feasibility of it has been just really hard in both counties that we serve. But I did see recently on Facebook that there's a new business starting called Prairie Compost Service Fargo Moorhead. And they're looking to get going with, as entrepreneurs, doing some of that compost waste collection and then having their own composting site. So just something for us to keep an eye on, and maybe we could hear from them after their first season in business to hear how it went. Thanks.
Is that an extension out of Minneapolis? Do you know?
I don't know. I haven't connected with them directly yet, so I'd be happy to learn a little bit more about that and get some information sent out as a follow-up.
That would be great. All right. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate the information. And we look forward to next month. Michelle, do you want to come up and give us an update from the steering committee? And by the way, if you would just introduce, or the steering committee members, if you would introduce yourself with this, that would be great.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm fortunate to be a co-chair of the steering committee, and I work at FargoCast Public Health in their health promotion division. And with that, I might ask the rest of the steering committee to introduce themselves as well. Start in front.
Hello, I'm Noelle Harden. I work with University of Minnesota Extension.
Good morning, I'm Erica Frank, and I'm with Clay County Planning and Zoning.
Good morning, I'm Rory Beal with Clay County Public Health.
Adam Altenberg, Fargo Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments.
And not with us today is Janice Tweet, who is also the co-chair. She is with the Great Plains Food Bank. Mary Larson is with NDSU, and Rita Usadis with NDSU Extension. So we have a very well-rounded steering committee. So to give a few updates, I wanted to start with the community of practice that we are participating in. We do continue to participate in their facilitated monthly meetings, and again, those are facilitated by Ohio State University, Johns Hopkins, and the USDA. Recently, our steering committee embarked on a brainstorming activity to really generate some ideas of how we would be able to utilize the stipend funding that we received by participating. And in combination with, as a large food commission, when we did kind of a mini strategic planning session last November, we utilized those ideas along with some more recent conversations to identify 3 action steps or 3 actions that we would like to move forward with in the community of practice. So one of those things would be the Coffee with the Food Commission, which I will give an update on that shortly. We had also talked about how do we highlight and bring forward those 5 videos that we were able to create with the city of Fargo, and thought that doing a watch party of sorts to bring people together, view the videos, and potentially hold a panel discussion following those videos would be a great way to bring the community together. And then the third thing that we discussed was offering small grant funds to individuals in our community or organizations in our community who are doing food systems related work. How can we potentially support their efforts, lift those up, and to provide some small funds to be able to support the work specifically around food systems in our community. So an example would be the little free gardens, for example, that are available in the community. We just heard about those last week at First Fridays. There's a $25 fee to get the materials, to get the little placard. Maybe that's an opportunity that we could support something like that in our community. Next week, Noelle, Janice, and myself are going to be traveling to Columbus to participate in person with the other food policy councils from around the nation. There are 11 of us total. So we're really looking forward to that. They have a full agenda for us, but we'll be participating in some mapping activities and some engagement workshops about inclusion and just a really full schedule. So we look forward to bringing back information and highlights on that at our meeting in September. Any questions about the community of practice at all? So with that, I would like to move over to sharing one of those videos that I had talked about, the impact of gleaning in our community.
Gleaning started here in our community in about 2017. The Cass Clay Food Commission was looking at a blueprint of how we could adopt a gleaning network here in our community. Gleaning is actually an ancient practice. It dates back to biblical times, if not before. In modern times, we think of it as going out, working with farmers, collecting any excess produce they may have, whether it be because they have a bumper crop or overplanted something or grew an extra row to donate. They allow us to come in, pick some of that produce, and then take it to food pantries and meal sites so that all of our neighbors have access to fresh produce.
I think there's many different layers to it. So not only is it getting food to the people that need it, but it's also connecting your community with people that are growing your food. In a lot of ways, it's just kind of bringing people from the city out. They're awfully busy with things going on. And bringing them out into the country, showing them what the country life is like is one of my favorite things, since that's what I grew up with. But also kind of giving them a perspective into the behind the scenes of where the food's coming from, how it's getting to where it needs to be.
27% of the food produced in the country never makes it to the dinner table, and so by being able to go out and help get some of this produce out of the fields, it really helps to lessen that waste and help make sure more food that we're producing is getting to neighbors' tables. Gleaning is important because it really allows more fresh produce into our local food system. All of our neighbors don't have access to that fresh, healthy produce that we can go buy at the grocery store, and so just a great way to ensure that our pantries have access to that fresh food as well.
So this gleaning program that the Cass Clay Food Partners has introduced has found a great partner in the Great Plains Food Bank, and they've really made it easy for us as producers to get involved with the program and make it easy for us to get a group of volunteers out to our farms to either save that produce was either going to go to waste, or if we just wanted to grow a little bit extra because we see the need, they make it easy for us to get it to where it's most needed.
We welcome people of all ages and backgrounds to help us glean, and the number of volunteers we need really just depends on what our glean is. When we have gleaning opportunities, we'll email our volunteer listserv, and then we also post those opportunities on Facebook, which you can find our Facebook page at facebook.com/Glean North Dakota.
All right. If any of you have not gleaned before or signed up to be a volunteer, I highly recommend it. It's very educational, and it is a great experience to get out and meet farmers and experience harvesting of that food. So moving on to steering committee updates, wanted to chat a little bit about coffee with the Food Commission. We have been able to host 2 events thus far, one in Fargo with Chair Preston and then one in Dilworth with Commissioner Krabenhoft. So thank you both for taking time to meet with members of our community. The engagement was good. We are getting increased involvement, but we obviously would love to see more. In Fargo, we met at 20 Below Coffee, and then in the Dilworth site with or over in Clay County, we were at Roasted Rail Coffee. And so we do really look forward to inviting other commissioners to volunteer, if you will, to be able to host one of these coffee events. And again, with the stipend money through our community of practice, we were able to purchase coffee for everybody. And so really wanting to increase engagement from the community, individuals who might not be able to come to meetings or these food commission meetings, to invite them to a more informal setting and just have a conversation around food systems and bring any interests. Any questions about Coffee with the Food Commission, or do I have any volunteers at the moment? Heather, wonderful. I will be in touch and we'll schedule something. Thank you so much.
And I have to say, Paul did a much better job of hosting in that he got a lot more people, and realizing that it helps to send out probably personal invitations to groups or people. So I totally missed that.
Well, I will also say, being the first event, it wasn't very well known. And so I think as we continue to do this and increase awareness, hopefully we'll be able to get more people to come.
All right, so you're up for the next one too, and I think we're catching up on our time frame. So thank you.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to be able to talk at this meeting about our kudos portion. And so this month we are highlighting Pastor Megan T. of West Fargo Eats and Lutheran Church of the Cross. So this year was the 50th annual Woman of the Year event. And the you know what I'm gonna say, YWCA hosts the Woman of the Year. So women are nominated who are leaders, mentors, visionaries, and more. And there were just over 40 women nominated this year, which was wonderful. And one of those, as mentioned, was Pastor Megan. So West Fargo Eats is a food share alliance between Lutheran Church of the Cross, Gates City Bank, the Y of Cass Clay, Great Plains Food Bank, and they offer a shopping style experience that really brings empowerment, respect, and dignity to individuals and families experiencing food insecurity. They do offer an in-person shopping and grocery pickup option, and truly meet people where they're at with a no judgment type environment. So thus far, and we're only in May, West Fargo Eats, they have served over 2,500 individuals, 800 households, 950 children, but they've also provided over 53,000 meals and 34,000 pounds of food. This is another volunteer opportunity that I highly recommend. I've done it several times, and it is a wonderful environment, and the feeling you get working with Pastor Megan and her team is phenomenal. And we did invite Megan to share a few words about her experience as well. So with that, I would like to offer up or welcome up Pastor Megan.
Hello. It's my first time here. I'll pull this way down there. Hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. West Fargo Eats was something that we started in 2020 when everything was completely locked down. I got a phone call from Marie Ng at the YWCA saying, would you guys ever be interested in having a refrigerated truck show up in your parking lot to distribute food? Because so many people couldn't come into food pantries at that time. So we're like, let's try it out. And we served 75 families at that first pop-up. Our pop-ups are something we do when weather permits. This winter being what it was, we chose not to have them, but we're starting them up. We actually have one next week. We'd love help getting the word out about that. So we'd like to say West Fargo Eats is a two-pronged model. The first prong is our storefront experience, so people can either pick up food and they call us to schedule that, or they can come in and shop in person. And then we also have our pop-ups. Pop-ups are really fun because we're able to feed so many more families, but we can't do the choice model like we do in our storefront. So we just basically turn our parking lot over by the old Gordman's building into a drive-through food distribution site. Families can drive through and pick up produce. I think on average, families stand to receive between 30 to 50 pounds of food. Kind of just depends on what Great Plains has available for us. And it's so much fun. This time we're going to try to break our record. I think our record is 285 families in 90 minutes. What our record was, but I'm hoping we can get to 300. So we'd love your help making that possible. If you'd like to volunteer, we still have spots available for that. And then our storefront operates every other week. We have a tiny storefront space, probably the size of these tables, but we serve, as Michelle mentioned, over 200 families a month just out of that little space. So we're very thankful. We really believe in this. We say it all the time. I'll never stop saying it. Everyone deserves to have something good to eat. No one should go hungry. There's no reason why anyone should ever have to go hungry or to not be able to have access to healthy and delicious food that meets their dietary needs. And we believe that. And we tell all of our clients all the time, you matter. You're not in this alone. We're here for you. We're a community that cares for each other and takes care of each other. So that's our why. And we'd love to have you join us. So thank you for your time. Are there any questions I can answer?
Where's the storefront?
Yes, sorry, I should have said more about that. So we had a garage at church that was just housing a dusty old van. And with the vision of Great Plains Food Bank, the YWCA, and Gate City Bank, and our church, we formed a committee to turn that garage into a really quite lovely store. We wanted it to feel like you were just coming into, albeit a very small grocery store, because that's part of dignity and empowerment. A lot of our clients are that's their first time facing food insecurity, and it can be really intimidating to have to ask for help. So we just said, come into the storefront, come and pick out your food just like you normally would. Yeah, that's what that means. We try to make it look like a grocery store.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions I can answer? All right.
Well, thank you, Pastor, for all of the work that you do and for that service. It's wonderful.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
The next item is public comment. I don't necessarily see anybody in the crowd, anybody online? Probably not. Okay. All right. So any update, this next section is any updates or comments that any of the commission members would want to bring to the attention of anyone else? Anything you want to share? Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to bring forward the new ordinance that, or the updated ordinance, I should say, that Moorhead has. So the city of Moorhead is now allowing people to have backyard chickens, up to 6. And that's a wonderful opportunity. And I just want to thank the commission members for their support, but also the steering committee for sending materials and creating them and having them available on the website. I think that was helpful for many residents as well as policymakers and staff to have access to those things. So I feel like that's a topic that we've discussed several times, and I had said we were in consideration of it, and it did pass. So this will be the first season of backyard chickens in Moorhead.
All right. Anything else?
I just have one small update. Our pantry at NDSU is going to be largely closed for the summer. We'll have just a few dry goods dates, so I may be sending some over to West Fargo Eats. I'll connect with you on those dates. But we do have the little free pantry that we plan on trying to stock real well, so hopefully that will offset a little bit of that. But it's basically one day a month instead of 8, so thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right, so then it's just announcements, and the next first Friday, which if you haven't had a chance to go to one of those, is June 2nd. I don't know what the topic is, but they're always interesting. And they happen at 701 Eatery, so coffee is good. Company's even better. Next coffee with commission, we've already, I think, done that and arranged for that. No July commission meeting, and our next meeting then is September 13th. If there's anything else for the good of the order, if not, we stand adjourned. Thank you for coming this morning. Thanks.